If we observe the Buddhist disciples in the world, be they monks, nuns, or lay Buddhists, why can't their accomplishments be compared with the previous generation? In the previous generation, there were many highly respected monks. And among the lay Buddhists, many were very outstanding too. But we can't find any in our generation. What's the reason? We have to identify the root cause in order to have an appropriate solution. Having searched for many decades, I finally understood the cause of the problem. The root cause is the absence of traditional Chinese education since young. Traditional Chinese education is the education on ethics, morality, and causality. For many generations since the ancient times, the Chinese learned these teachings from their childhood. Our childhood days weren't so fortunate. Even though we were unfortunate, we were considered lucky to be born and raised in an agricultural village. "20 years before the formation of the Republic of China, traditional thinking was still very strong in agricultural villages. When we were young, we studied at a private school, Sishu, that provided the foundational education on ethics, morality, and causality. After I turned 8 years old, the national education was reformed and private schools no longer existed. They became short-term schools. The new textbooks contain things like, the puppy is barking, the kitten is jumping. They taught such things. This is very problematic. We were lucky to be exposed to the foundation of traditional Chinese culture. My brother, who was 6 years younger than me, no longer received this kind of education. Thus, he completely has no knowledge of it at all. So, we have lost the basic education or foundational education of traditional Chinese culture for at least 4 generations. Modern people don't have this knowledge. Neither do their parents, nor grandparents. Perhaps their great-grandparents over the age of 100 would have this knowledge. We were fortunate to be born in an agricultural village. If we were to be born in a city, I wouldn't have this knowledge, because urbanization in the city was rapid. Being exposed to the basics of traditional Chinese culture, we were able to understand what the outcome would be. In situations whereby students directly attend primary school without proper preschool education, they can't learn well even if they keep studying all their lives. They just don't have the foundation. The same applies to learning in Buddhism. Thus, in the past years, we particularly emphasized foundational education and the need to catch up on the three foundations of education, namely Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. The foundation of Confucianism is 弟子规, Guide to a Happy Life. The foundation of Taoism is 太上感应篇, Treatise on Response and Retribution. And the foundation of Buddhism is 十善业道经, the 10 Virtuous Karmas Sutra. Without such foundational education, it's definitely impossible to learn Buddhist sutras. Even if we're committed and make concerted efforts to learn, we'll only gain superficial knowledge. What's the terminology that's used nowadays? Buddhist studies. You aren't learning and practicing Buddhism, so you won't be able to reap the true benefits of Buddhism and experience them. Why is it so? To understand Buddhism, we need a pure mind. Without a pure mind, we can't experience what the teaching is all about. Thus, it means that we need to enter into a state of meditative concentration to understand it. Without this, we won't be able to understand and experience it. To have a calm mind, we must firmly let go of our selfishness, cravings for fame and wealth, 5 desires and 6 dusts, greed, hatred, and delusion. Only then could we enter into a preliminary state of meditative concentration. If we're still strongly attached to all these, then we won't be able to achieve meditative concentration. Hence, our learning of the Buddhist sutras will be superficial and literal. The opening verse of the Buddhist sutras, which states that we should aspire to comprehend the true meaning of the Buddhist teachings, can't be attained. Instead, we'll easily misinterpret and misunderstand the true teachings of the Buddha. We would mistake our own understanding as the Buddha's message. This is completely wrong. Hence, if we really want to learn Buddhism, become true disciples of the Buddha, and aspire to have some achievement in our lifetime, then we won't be able to succeed without rebuilding the 3 foundations. We must put in extra effort to seriously learn the 3 foundations of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. They're more important than anything else. Being enlightened is so important. Insight is so important. everybody has insight. It's an innate ability that every person who's born into this world possesses. The problem is, children haven't been educated properly. The ancients' teachings try to preserve a child's innocence and his innate nature, which was originally good. Thus, the greatest merits and success of a mother is to provide good foundational education for her children. The foundational education lasts for 3 years or 1,000 days, from the time a child is born till he's 3 years old. Monitor him carefully for the first 1,000 days. Don't let the child see, listen to, or come in contact with people, things, and matters that are negative and violate moral and ethics education. Parents should uphold proprieties. They should act as a role model for their children by behaving in a proper manner and by keeping their minds upright. These 1,000 days will shape a child's good habits, and he'll then have the ability to distinguish between good and evil, right and wrong, virtues and immorality. In addition, he'll stay away from the unvirtuous and get close to the virtuous. In this foundational education, mothers are the greatest. The children whom they have given birth to and nurtured would become saints or sages. And their daughters would become sage mothers, the mothers of sages in the future, thus enabling sages to be born one after another in China. In ancient China, women were well respected, with examples that could be found in the classics. Modern people do not have this knowledge because nobody passed it on to them. Foundational education isn't something that could be revived in a short time. In ancient China, the foundational education from generation to generation comprised of Di Zi Gui, Guide to a Happy Life, Treatise on Response and Retribution, and the 10 Virtuous Karma Sutra. When does this education begin? It begins from birth till the age of 3, which adds up to 1,000 days. This education consolidates a child's foundation. With this training, children will be as calm and composed as adults. They are unlike Western children who are active and very cute. In contrast, the children trained in China are very calm and composed. They have meditative concentration and wisdom. They behave with good manners. All these are cultivated from young. Thus, there's an ancient saying that goes, at the age of 3, you can foresee a person's character at 80. All that's cultivated up till 3 years old won't change with old age. With meditative concentration, a person would have wisdom and could thereby achieve great success. He's considered as the late bloomer who finally achieves success after decades of training. Hence, the educational objective of Chinese education is to attain 3 academic qualifications, so to speak. Becoming a saint, a sage, or a 君子, man with noble character. Saints are like people with doctoral degrees. Sages are like those with master degrees, and 君子 are like people with bachelor's degrees. These 3 academic qualifications are known as the sage's education. This education no longer exists today. As a result, society is chaotic. It has become so chaotic now that we're helpless and don't know how to resolve it. I've met a lot of people who were very concerned about this, but nobody managed to come up with a solution. Only by rediscovering the ancient teachings could society be stable and peaceful again. If we don't revive the ancient teachings, it will be too difficult for us to try to think of a set of measures. Before you can figure it out, the world will already be destroyed. The ancient teachings help to maintain stability in society and the world. And it's proven through thousands of years of history. Thus, we can see that it's invaluable and can't be neglected.
Several days ago, a young man came to look for me and said he wanted to learn traditional Chinese culture. He told me that he's impetuous. I told him frankly that he didn't fulfill the criterion required for being a student. He asked me why. The criterion for being a student is to be able to attain meditative concentration. Impetuousness will result in the inability to achieve success in learning, be they worldly dharmas and transcendental dharmas. Thus, what does the traditional teaching method of the Chinese teach us since ancient times? They educate us to become calm and composed from young, and behave like a younger adult. We can see this from 弟子规, Guide to a Happy Life. Hence, most people nowadays can't really comprehend traditional Chinese culture. They think that children should be lively and active, and such behavior is a proof of childlike innocence. If we follow the ancient Chinese and teach every single child to be so honest, with such education, how would the child be able to cope with the society in the future? When we listen to such words, they seem very logical. However, they aren't justifiable in actual fact. Children should learn to be mature. With meditative concentration, one will possess wisdom, so he is equipped with the ability to deal with contemporary society. Western education can't achieve this, because the focus is on the development of skills and knowledge. Thus, nowadays, foreigners think of seeking wisdom in China through traditional culture, and in India through Buddhism. Perhaps it has become a trend in this century, and the ancient Chinese saints and sages are becoming more and more popular. I heard that the US Congress has passed a bill that fixed Confucius's birthday as Confucius Day. On this day every year, there'll be a holiday to commemorate Confucius. The number of people who read Confucius's books and learn about his wisdom is increasing. This is a positive phenomenon. If Confucianism can be revived, so can Buddhism. Why is this so? In Buddhism, after Shakyamuni Buddha entered Nirvana, his disciples promoted the teaching in different places. In some places, Buddhism disappeared in less than a century. In other places, it remained for 6 to 7 centuries. And in some other locations, it lasted for over 1,000 years. Only in China has Buddhism really taken root and become integrated with Chinese culture. This makes sense because Buddhism is about the way of a teacher, which is built upon the foundation of filial piety. For thousands of years, the Chinese have taught their descendants filial piety and love and respect for siblings. They taught the values of being filial towards parents and serving one's teachers. This is hugely beneficial for Buddhism. Buddhism needs this nutrient to thrive and bear fruit. Thus, the achievements in Chinese Buddhism generation after generation were far greater than those in India. This is the reason. Buddhism is in decline now. What's the reason? Confucianism is declining. Confucianism is no longer able to support Buddhism. In Buddhist terms, this support is called Dharma protection. We were born Chinese and have the conditions to come into contact with the traditional culture. Speaking of traditional culture, we can't separate it from Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. Ethics and moral education are found in Confucianism. The education of causality is found in Taoism, and the great compassion is found in Buddhism. Compassion is the education of eliminating delusion and achieving enlightenment. It's the most perfect education. It's much more convenient for the Chinese to learn traditional Chinese education as compared to foreigners, because it's the local culture after all. Foreigners are putting in extra effort to learn it, and this has influenced us as well. When we see so many people learning it and commending it, we'd also look back and reaffirm its value.
One must generate a great vow. The biggest problem in the world now is whether or not culture can be passed on. This is a huge undertaking. If culture can't be passed on, this world will be destroyed. Why is that so? Human beings will no longer know what's good or evil, assuming that what's evil is good, and vice versa. Their views are deluded. As a result, culture won't last very long in this world. Saving our culture is an important task. So I advise fellow practitioners to generate vows to save our culture, starting from each individual. How do we do so? Vow to be a primary school teacher for your entire life and establish the educational foundation of children. This is an extremely good cause. Educate children on ethics and morality. Practice 弟子规, treatise of response and retribution, and the 10 Virtuous Karma Sutra, in addition to teaching them Chinese characters and their etymologies, classical Chinese, and 说文解字, analytical dictionary of Chinese characters. Every single Chinese character is an embodiment of art, philosophy, and knowledge. It'll take a very long time for one to be able to explain every single character clearly and comprehensively. Without several days and nights of explanation, sometimes we can't even explain a character clearly. The character itself is so rich and embodies so much. It's philosophy, it's art. Unlike Western characters, Chinese characters are totally different. They carry Dao, the law of nature, and morality in them. The first character of the Chinese language is Yi, one. This word has endless meanings, but frankly speaking, one can't even finish explaining it in one's lifetime. How wonderful it is! You see, 二, 2, emanates from 一, 1, and 三, 3, grows from 二, 2. All things originate from 三, 3, and so it's the root of all things. It's the source of all things. This is incredible. Foreigners don't know this. If they gain this understanding, they'll be delighted too. To explain Chinese characters clearly and comprehensively, we truly need to work on it and spend our whole lives teaching primary school to help children build a good foundation. Upon establishing a strong foundation for children, learning everything else will be a breeze for them. They won't have any difficulties. Since ancient times in China, foundational education has always been prioritized in early childhood education and moral cultivation, known as 同盟养正. There are a dozen or so compulsory textbooks that form the selected readings of children, and they're only taught to read, but aren't given the explanation. They'd wait until the students turn 11 or 12 before explaining the meaning to them. Childhood years are totally devoted to helping children establish precepts and meditative concentration. We teach them only one subject, not two. This helps to cultivate meditative concentration. They would read a classical Chinese text repeatedly many times, but the focus isn't on learning by heart. Learning by heart isn't important. It's to prevent children from having wandering thoughts. Let them think about what they've read, and it could reduce their wandering and discriminatory thoughts and attachments. The object is to attain meditative concentration. When he's older, he could specialize in one Buddhist sutra or one work from the Confucian classics, historical records, philosophical writings, or literature. He could select what he's interested in and specialize in it for a decade, or what the ancients described as long-term study under poor conditions. There's wisdom in it, and it's possible for one to be enlightened. As the saying goes, reading a book 1,000 times reveals its true meaning. In the past, the teacher's job was a very relaxed one. We could see this from 学记, record on the subject of education. The students had hard lives. Teachers didn't teach students, but it was the students who explained things to their teachers. If their teachers nodded in approval, then it was an indication that they had passed. If the teachers listened to the explanations and felt that the student hadn't expressed the essence or profound meaning of the text, they might offer some supplementary explanations. All in all, the goal was to unlock the student's wisdom. And it definitely wasn't done through memorization and regurgitation. It wasn't about remembering many things, but about enlightening the mind. Only if we use the ancient Chinese method and idea can we achieve enlightenment. Using the current scientific method is totally wrong. We could only acquire knowledge, not wisdom. What's the reason? The threefold learning, precepts, meditative concentration, and wisdom is absent. We need to know this. In our lifetime, if we want to achieve success in learning, but we don't know the principles, no matter what kind of success we achieve, it would only be superficial. Thus, by having transcendental vows, all will naturally be achieved. This statement is well made. One must generate a Bodhi mind and great vows to inherit and pass down traditional culture. He should promote the culture and bequeath it to the later generations. No matter how poor one is, his life would be valuable. For example, Confucius wasn't wealthy and lived meagerly, but his true aspirations were great. To revive and pass down the lost teachings of the sages, we have to learn to be like Confucius. Having such ambitions, wisdom, and farsightedness, we could bring blessings to the world and to our future generations. Only then could one be called a great person in the world. So it's definitely not the kind of hero or outstanding figure who lasts for one lifetime only. The aforementioned points should be understood by lay Buddhist practitioners. Everything comes naturally, not through intentional seeking. What's the method to improve oneself? Through teaching. Thus, since ancient times in China, education has always been given the top priority for thousands of years. This is the same in the family. When a mother gets pregnant, she begins to learn fetal education. When the child is born, the moment he opens his eyes, he's able to see. And when he sleeps, his ears can listen to things. He has already begun to learn. The education from birth to the age of 3 that lasts for a total of 1,000 days is called foundational education. Who teaches him? His mother. How does the mother teach him? She teaches him 弟子规, Guide to a Happy Life. But it's not about reciting the classic. She practices the principles of 弟子规 for her child to see, and he learns everything from there. So you can see that a 3 to 4-year-old child is very sensible and has the ability to distinguish between right and wrong or good and evil. It's such a good foundational education. Nowadays, this no longer exists, so children have become hard to teach. Children are very easy to teach if you educate them from young. As the saying goes, good habits formed since childhood will become second nature. The ancient Chinese spoke of teaching a child from infancy. By the time he's 3, it would be too late. He's already begun to pick up bad habits. Who's teaching him now? Television. When 6 or 7-year-olds go to primary school, what do teachers use to teach these Year 1 pupils? The internet. The development in China is slightly behind. Over 2 decades ago, when I was in the US, the grandson of Madame Han, former director of the Huazhang Buddhist Library, was 6 and went to primary school. They had already begun using the computer in Year 1. The information in the computer is complicated. Hence, the child's family members have no idea what he's watching or learning. So parents aren't teaching their own children nowadays. All these devices are teaching them. What's the content? Let's think of it carefully. It contains violence, pornography, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and deceit. Their foundational education contains all these. So won't things be more terrible in the future? The entire society is like this now. Hence, if one doesn't know how to be filial to his parents, respect his teachers, and value the course he's learning, then he won't achieve anything. No matter how good a teacher is, this person can't be educated. This is where the difficulty of restoring traditional teaching lies. People nowadays are indulgent since young, and it has become a habit. They're ill-behaved. In ancient Chinese education, children were taught to observe the rules from young. There were specific appearances for sitting and standing. With exposure to such rigorous restrictions from young, how could they be doing things in a slipshod manner? How could they be ill-behaved and flout the rules? Thus, 弟子规, Guide to a Happy Life, is a set of rules. When should it be taught? When a child is born, he's able to see when he opens his eyes and hears when he pricks up his ears. Although he can't speak yet, he already begins to observe and learn things. Thus, the ancient Chinese speak of educating children from infancy. Not young children, but newborns. Foundational education lasts for the first 1,000 days, or 3 years. From the time of birth till the child turns 3 years old. The foundation established in these 3 years is reflected in the old saying that at the age of 3, you can foresee a person's character at 80. If this foundational education is well established, all the good values and habits will remain till one's old age. Therefore, 弟子规 isn't for children to recite. It should be implemented and demonstrated to the children. It's totally a case of leading by example. When children observe how their parents are dutiful to their own parents, they'll learn this. When they grow up, they'll also be filial to their parents. Thus, parents and other family members have to uphold proprieties and be well-mannered in front of their children. Why is this so? Their children are learning from them. We definitely can't let them see or hear anything that's negative. What he sees, hears, or comes into contact with should be completely positive. Nowadays, this kind of education no longer exists. From the time a child opens his eyes, what he sees, hears, and comes into contact with is totally negative. Modern parents are busy with their own matters and don't spend time to educate their own children. Who takes on the duty of teaching the children then? Domestic helpers. What do domestic helpers teach children? They're afraid that the children will be noisy and cause trouble. So they give them whatever they like, serve them delicious food, and let them have fun. Children are allowed to watch TV, and when they get addicted, the domestic helper is happy. Why? Her job is easy and she needn't worry. By watching TV programs, children are exposed to violence, pornography, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and deceit. They learn all these. Modern parents moan that children are difficult to teach. teachers also complain about the same thing. In the past, we didn't seem to hear parents and teachers speak of this. It never happened. It's the consequence of modern society. Ancient society prioritized studying and understanding the truth. This isn't the case nowadays. In modern society, priority is given to the wealthiest person. So people try to acquire wealth through unscrupulous means. Human beings fight for personal benefits. Would the world still have peace and stability? It's unlikely. The word competition is the culprit that harmed us. The virtuous root of no anger is one of the 3 virtuous roots. There's a brief explanation of this in our reference material. Towards all sentient beings, don't show anger and don't hurt and annoy them. This Dharma of no anger is the inherited nature and could serve as a root of boundless virtues. Thus, it's known as the virtuous root of no anger. No greed, no anger, and no ignorance are all known as virtuous roots. The 3 virtuous roots, no greed, no anger, no ignorance, could lead to the development of all that's virtuous. To be honest, these 3 virtuous roots are hugely important to one's foundational education. If a child's parents pay attention to this when he's still young and educate him properly, he'll definitely reap the benefits in his entire lifetime. The teacher must practice what he preaches. If he doesn't do so, you won't experience the effects. We've come across Albert Einstein's introduction of his mother. She was kind and never lost her temper throughout her life. And she never spoke harshly to anyone. He learned this since young. Einstein said he had never scolded anybody in his life and never lost his temper, thanks to his mom's influence. His mother cultivated this in him since young, and it had a long-lasting effect that persisted throughout his life. So it's obvious that foundational education is extremely important. A mother is the first teacher of human beings. This teacher is more important than anything else. Whether or not a person could become a saint, sage, an exceptional person, whether or not learning Buddhism can lead one towards becoming a Buddha or a Bodhisattva, it all depends on the foundation. The foundation is the seed. The opportunities in one's lifetime depends on conditions. If he meets good teachers and good fellow Buddhist practitioners and comes across good affinity, all these are good conditions. If the conditions are good, but there's no foundation, it's still very difficult to achieve success. A sound foundation coupled with good conditions will definitely bring success. Thus, nothing is more important than one's foundation.